Hi. Right, I'm going back now to examine the wyrd and the way that most of certainly the Western world is run these days by career politicians who've been to some decent school, gone to university, worked as some sort of employee of some political party or local council, and then they finally become the government. Now, it seems pretty obvious to people that are not any of those things that they're not doing a very good job. Things aren't getting better. What they do doesn't seem to really make sense. Now, there's a little puzzle going around the internet, particularly Facebook. Been going around for a while now. It's this, only written sort of nicer. It says, solve if you are a genius. 8 equals 56, 7 equals 42, 6 equals 30, 5 equals 20, 3 equals question mark. Question mark. Now, lots of people have considered this puzzle, and it would appear on the surface to be, it reminded me instantly of the 11 plus that I took years ago, obviously when I was 11. You had to do English questions, you had to do maths questions, and you had to do intelligence questions. And this is rather like the kind of question that would come under the intelligence questions. And I suppose it also brings to mind there's a new quiz started on BBC television called The Brain, where they get in students, presumably from universities, in a group of 4. The first time there were 2 white people and 2 who weren't white, and the second time there was 1 that was white and 3 that weren't. Now, I'm not making any point here other than the sort of people that seem to be quite good at solving these so-called intelligence problems to get themselves. This is how they get into high positions in society, by solving these sort of problems. Now, I want you to look at the problem again. Okay. Now it says 8 equals 56, 7 equals 42, 6 equals 30, 5 equals 20, 3 equals question mark. The question is, what does 3 equal? Now, I don't know whether you can see this properly here, but this is an example from an American group. You see the same. You'll see the same thing there. You'll see how they work on it, and there's various options of this times this, 5 minus blah blah blah. Second option with x, n1, n2. And then y equals 3 times 3, blah, and so on, n1, n2, n6, and then the comments, perhaps where the infinite number of analytic fx versus x functions can be written to match any finite set, blah, 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 blah. And then we get down here with all this working at the bottom here, 7 equals 42, and they come to various answers, none of which are correct. Now, I also looked on a friend's site, and they do a similar but not quite such pompous process, and eventually somebody gets it right at the end. Now, I will admit here that since it reminded me of these quizzes, I did the intelligence test, the bit that it seems to imply you should do, and came to what some people might consider to be the correct, in fact quite a lot of people consider to be the correct answer. And it is, I still maintain, the correct answer to a puzzle that unfortunately we weren't set. Now this is where I mentioned the wyrd, the contact with other people. Now, the very fact I'm presenting it to you like this, I'm hoping that we can now see why, in actual fact, I think you'll find that more ordinary English people will solve this problem than certainly your New World Order type in a university. I think they'd find it really, really difficult to solve this problem. The answer is very simple. 3 equals 3, it always has done. It doesn't say if 8 gives by some formula 56, if 7 by some formula gives 4. It simply gives you a load of false information and then asks you a question. 3 is always equal to 3. It doesn't ask you anything else. And it's shocking the amount of brain power, intelligence and learning that these university people can do in order to get the wrong answer. And that really sums life up, doesn't it? You just need to sit back and think, the word's telling me there's a catch. I'll simply type the numbers into Google and see what it says. And there it is, the answer. Now, I didn't cop the answer before I looked it up, but I knew that it wasn't the calculation, the logical progression that you need to work out. It's a catch question. Now, I'd be interested to know how many, before I explained it to you, how many of you probably seen it on Facebook and didn't see that it was a catch. Never mind whether you saw the catch. The question is, did you see that this is some sort of spoof? Is it not a matter of working it out? It's a matter of, why don't I need to work it out? But of course the answer is, it didn't ask you a question. It only asked you what 3 equals. That's just the only thing it asked you. There are lots of children's games, one of which I remember as a child, which runs along the line of spell flop, spell mop, and various other words, and usually about 5 will do. And then what do you do when you see a green light? And most kids will say stop, but of course green is for go. This puzzle is exactly like that. You put ideas in people's heads and they don't think. And the more education you get, the less people seem to be able to think. So on that, I'll say bye.